Hi, it's Sam, the one who makes the games. In this episode, Noodle and I talk about a video idea we had after getting a sponsorship opportunity. We forgot to establish that during the conversation. Oops. Enjoy. I believe that we have both been working many consecutive hours for many consecutive days.
Yeah.
And at least on this end, I feel like I've been on a bit of a treadmill.
Yeah.
Everything feels like it's a problem that you open it up and there's actually two more problems behind that. And at some point the number of problems is going to start going down, but that's only just barely started to happen.
It was so funny the day that I found out that that you were going through this, because it was the day that I also had that happen to me. I will say I do not envy yours, because mine was like a short controlled burst, you know? Mm-hmm. It was like burned bright and quick, and then it was over.
Yeah.
And I only lost about half a day to it.
Yeah, right now I'm working on something that I thought was going to take 3 hours last week. And what's even worse is that, like, normally when I'm going through it like this, I can turn it into a story or something. I can't. It's just like really minute technical bullshit on the Mac operating system. There's no way to make that interesting.
I mean, the context around it is fun. In that the actual thing itself is not interesting in any capacity, but the journey that you're going through is very fun for me as a spectator sport.
Right, because it's not just me that you get to watch suffer. You get to watch, like, all of the experts that I'm interacting with also reveal their little pile of suffering. It's like an advent calendar of misery.
You're like Dang from Davatar, you know, where you look back and he see all his ancestor, and they're all looking at him, and they eye glow. You know the one.
Yeah, man. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, it's very...
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm so sorry.
Oh, really? That's one of the most common fucking things ever. Whatever, who cares? It's so funny to me to see you have the interactive version of the experience that I've had countless times, where you run into a problem, you don't even know where to start. You start looking stuff up, and you just get various flavors of dead end, whether it's zero search results on Google or, forum from 10 years ago with one reply saying works on my machine or whatever else, right?
Yeah, I think my favorite one of those for this was when there was a GitHub issue opened where, like, someone is been a little forum post that's attached to a code base, and someone was like, hey, I'm having this exact issue that I'm having. And then one of the developers of the code base was like, oh shit, yeah, we'll fix that. And then underneath it, you could just watch them keep moving the task to fix it, like, further and further into the future. Like, we're gonna do it in a few months. We'll do it in 6 months.
How long ago?
Next version. It's been years. It's like it felt like a joke at my expense specifically, because these are all about me, of course.
Yeah.
It's always a joy to have the experience of, like, digging through an old forum and watching people commiserate, except it's not an old forum. It's real live people in a Discord server who have gone through it one too many a time.
Yeah, my favorite example that you showed me was the person who started their conversation by just saying the feature you're working with was dog shit, and then not saying anything else for like several minutes.
Yeah.
Making you think that was just the entirety of what they were going to give you.
Yeah, I had like a multi-paragraph write-up of my issue, and they just said, oh yeah, so this is, to use a technical term, horse shit. And then that was all they said.
He's a very experienced person, by the way. This isn't just some rando.
Yeah. No, it's really good. I feel like this happens a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
That I end up going down a rabbit hole like this.
Yeah, see, it's like with my favorite one, like the color calibration thing, right? It's like, again, there's no way to make that into an interesting narrative. I don't think I can properly convey to anybody who hasn't already been to the mines why it is torturous to learn exactly what an ICC profile is and how it relates to lookup tables. But what I can do is tell you that I thought that it would be a quick fix when I bought the $100 piece of hardware, which is apparently the budget option. And then I spent like 3 days trying to figure out how to use it after I thought I had learned years ago. And by the time I was done, I knew less than when I started.
There is something kind of nature of hubris about this whole story.
Yeah, you always, these stories always start when you realize that you've crossed Mount Stupid. You know, that's where it always really begins.
That's a really good turn of phrase.
It's when you truly realize just how little you actually know, and then the more you learn, the even less you know.
Yeah,
you never feel like you're making progress on these. It just sort of ends at some point.
Yeah, the amount of unknown bullshit gets ever larger as you move through the world, and then you die.
It's awful because it's like it's supposed to feel, making things is supposed to feel like progress, but whenever you're just troubleshooting some stupid bullshit that is not what you're trying to get done, but you have to get done in order to get done when you want to get done, it's just the process of going through enough motions to clear a roadblock.
Yeah.
You're not moving forward. You're just trying to get back up and running.
Oh, yeah. No, I fucking love the experience I just had involved, like, I did one thing to try and solve my original problem, and then I spent several days trying to fix that. And then I felt this huge sigh of relief as I solved all the new problems I just had. And then I realized the thing I'd achieved was being right back where I started.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly the problem I had.
Except now I know more. I'm now burdened with more facts.
No, this is kind of where I ended up last time with it too. I got a new monitor because I'm working on a video, and for the first time, I'm not going all practical with it. I'm using Blender to create a backdrop, and there's a funny joke in here somewhere about how no one wants to shoot practical anymore. But anyway, I needed a new monitor to do that.
No, there's not. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I needed a new monitor, and I plug it in, and it creates this funny new quirk wherever it just does not show me the boot screen. It just is silent, and then Windows is there. And I think that's curious. And so I try to figure out what that is. And then my entire night evaporates as I have to reinstall firmware on my motherboard and drag 3 other monitors into my room and create a nest of cables and fucking I'm downloading drivers and firmware, and at some point I have to reinstall Windows and then find out that's actually not what was causing the issue. And by the end of the night, I successfully got back to the point where the monitor worked, because for a while it just wasn't working at all.
Yeah.
I kind of just gave up whenever I got back to the point wherever the monitor did not show me the boot screen but went to Windows. That was fine. That's enough. That's fine. I can live with that.
Yeah. Again, it's real hard to provide thrilling commentary on what brings you to the moment where you're just staring at a progress bar that won't end, praying to be euthanized.
Yeah.
There's no... Because that's a powerful human moment. That's a very powerful, deeply human moment. But you can't walk people there.
Imagine trying to explain this to someone who lived in, I don't know, the 1400s.
I'm sure that they had their versions of this, maybe, but it wouldn't.
Maybe it was like government bureaucracy. Maybe it was like trying to apply for I don't know, owning a horse or something was like this.
Thank God we've solved all those problems.
So true. So true. It's amazing how technology has simplified our lives.
God. Yes.
Thinking back to that C by GE smart bulbs video.
I love that video so much. Billy, put that entire video here.
Fuck no.
The entire I'll spare you, the listener, and I'll just tell you that it's like a 10-minute long video wherever they hired a voiceover guy to just narrate the process of having to turn on and off your smart bulb for a specific series of times for like 5 minutes straight to factory reset your light bulb.
I'll tell you what happened is there's a fucking middle manager who said, I want to make an elegant light, because he just read the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. He's like, I want to make an elegant light bulb, so we're going to have no factory reset button, but you still got to make it factory reset, so figure it out. And the engineers were like, well, we just have to, I guess if you don't have a button to do it, and the only interaction you have with this light bulb is turning it on and off, we just need to create a unbelievably improbable sequence of turning it on and off at various time intervals, so that you end up accidentally factory reset your light bulb, but you can do it on purpose. And then the instructional video on it is like 10 million minutes long,
and it's just the same guy saying over and over, turn on for 8 seconds,
turn off for 3 seconds,
turn off for 2 seconds. on for 8 seconds.
It's a testament to human ingenuity.
It is. That video tests your sanity. I imagine like a grandma being gifted one of those as a Christmas present and just being literate enough to figure out how to make it work. And then it has a problem where it needs to be factory reset. Imagine the phone call between that grandma and GE customer support.
Imagine Thomas Edison finding it in his heart to kill a man.
Customer service rep says turn on the bulb for 8 seconds, the third time over the phone, to which grandma responds, I already did that. To which the customer service rep says, well, it's been 9 seconds. We got to roll it back now. We got to start over.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that'll be our next episode, is we'll just buy and attempt to factory reset one of those bulbs.
Can you factory reset the GE smart bulb challenge? GE smart bulb factory reset speed run.
Holy shit. There's got to be a leaderboard for that.
Oh, we'll make one.
Oh, man. Technology.
Yeah. I'm just burnt out because I have been crunching for the past few days to get a video done, and it's nowhere near done yet. What else is new? Crunching is a loose term as well. It's like I'm still giving myself like an hour or two off every day. You know, it's not like I'm literally all I'm doing is like waking up, working, going to bed. I have to get off and out away from my desk on occasion, but I'm really not doing much with my life aside from working. So I'm comfortable calling it that. And it's only going to get worse. It's going to get a lot more extreme as we go into this week. I can feel it.
Yeah, he lets himself eat some food. It's not the worst it could be.
We were talking about the idea of making a video game at some point, which is probably the main thing we're going to get into. But I figured I'd get a head start on that, you know? I wanted to like immerse myself in that kind of headspace ahead of time. I figure what better way to do that than to start fasting.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, listen, here's the thing. My only problem with your current approach is that you're working from home. We're not going to let you go home.
Right.
When push comes to shove, that's not going to happen.
You say to the guy who is the only reason this project it could possibly exist.
Yeah.
Imagine working at Naughty Dog and walking up to Neil Druckmann, walking up to him as like an assistant animator and saying, listen, you're not going to be able to go home today.
As advisor, I will advise you, do not go home. Do not visit your family.
Hi, Julian, last name, assistant animator, self-prescribed advisor to CEO. Here just letting you know, we're going to need you overtime tonight. We've set up a bunk bed over there. Thanks, Neil.
Your dog, you're fired.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah.
So I hatched a little brain idea. I guess I'll lead in terms of what we can talk about, because if Asus gets mad at us for this, then they can get mad at me and not you. They have been interested for a while in getting me to make a big gigafuck project, kind of like how I did with Dying Light, right? Dying Light came to me with a fat fuck number, like a 5-digit sum. I'm not naming the number because I can't remember what they paid me. It's all gone. And you know, that's exciting, but the trouble is I learned a lot on the Dying Light project, and I'm proud of the work that everyone did except for me and the writers, because none of us are writers, and it shows. That is a very well directed, poorly written animation, in my opinion. No shade to anyone who wrote on it. It was our first time, and we did really well considering that, but it is what it is. If there's one thing I'm grateful for, it's that I'm not an ideas guy, because God knows we have an abundance of those out there. But it puts me in a weird position for an offer like this, right? Because the guy is asking me, you know, if you had, say, $50,000, what would you do with that? And I get to smile really big and say, I don't fucking know. I've got stuff I'd like to do, but I don't really have a way to do it. So it's a very weird, privileged, awkward position to find myself in. One day I'm just sitting looking at that message, and I go to Sam and I'm like, hey, you know about video games? You know about those?
I've heard rumors.
How did that I've already forgotten how that conversation went. How'd it go?
You were saying that there was like some other project that you had an idea for that you felt like wasn't quite feasible, and then you threw out the idea of what would it even look like to try and do a video game with this money?
Just a complete offhand suggestion of like, you know, in today's world, wherever most video games cost $1 million minimum to make, or according to most people, what would 50K video game even look like? And like, what's the scope of something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not that video game cost $1 million. It's that the expectation is that if someone's going to fund your video game, it has to be for like that amount of money. Whereas like you totally can make games.
There is pressure from the people giving that money out to scale up, because the idea is that why would you bother with a low risk, low reward scenario when if you just pump more money into the thing, you can make more money back? I guess.
Which is why I had such a strange reaction to your message, because like what you were coming to me with is like the idea of a funder who doesn't even want anything back or really knows what they want you to do, besides the idea of, I don't know, maybe you want to do something and say our name in the middle of it. Well, and that's a fucking insane thing to bring to the context of like what if made video game.
Well, here's the thing, right? That's not actually the context that we exist within. The real context is, as of recording this, we still have not properly pitched this idea in detail to Asus or any other potential people, because Asus aren't the only people we could talk to about this, right? But they're just the people that we're in talks with. And like, oh, and to be clear, all the figures I've given out, just to cover my ass, not exact. I'm throwing numbers out there. But generally speaking, I'm in a good enough place with them that this is an idea that I'm confident that if we pitch to them, we could have something with, which is further than most people could possibly get in a situation like this, and especially not without several monkeys' paws curling along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah. No, it's not as if they're just throwing a bunch of money at us and saying fucking do something, but that's not what's happening at the same time, potentially.
Asus comes to you with a gigafuck amount of sponsorship money idea and says, hey, do you want to do something like this? You come to me saying, how would it look if we did video game with this?
The question essentially boils down to, how would it look if instead of giving them what they're asking for, we just throw a complete Hail Mary their way and hope that they're into the idea? What would that be like?
Yeah. And because normally the expectation when you're getting funding for a video game is that everything is contingent on getting to a specific final product. But here, which is obviously, you know, finished game that looks like a certain thing and will sell an amount of copies. But here, very bizarrely, that expectation is not necessarily actually present, because this is not a publisher coming to you with money. It's like sponsoring a race car. It's like being in the fucking early 1900s sponsoring a bunch of dumbasses to go to Antarctica and die there. You know, you can completely pitch this as that, and we won't even die probably.
Right. The idea isn't, they're not asking for a video game, they're asking for a video. And granted, they're asking for a specific kind of video, but if we pitched them on a different thing entirely, that's still something, it's still, the deliverable that we're pitching is not a video game at the end of the day. It is the story of a video game being made. It is basically a scaled up version of the Dying Light post-mortem video, you know, detailing the process of how that happened. But this time around, I'm much more confident in both the story itself and the potential of the process. Those are kind of like intertwined, but I mean, just like imagine a video where the premise is some variation of like, this sponsor gave me a gigafuck amount of money. I've never made a video game before. I'm leading this project and I have like 4 months at most, probably a lot less.
Yeah,
that's some grade A YouTube clickable content right there. But it's not and a lot of people will come into that, A, because that's an interesting premise, or B, because, oh my God, that sounds like a nightmare. A YouTuber cannot make a video game with no experience. This is going to crash and burn. And, you know, I do have a bit more experience than the average person, and I have a lot of connections to people with way more experience who I would be leaning on constantly for feedback and input. But also, yes, it absolutely could crash and burn and fail. And we're in the unique position where that's okay. Like, we'll all be fine.
Not only is it okay, it's funny.
That can be the story, and that's good. Because we can't stress enough, the deliverable is not the video game. So if the video game sells like shit, or we don't even sell it or release it, that's fine. The only thing we have to give them is a video about making it. So the stakes are uniquely low here. And it's really cool that I pitched this idea to Sam, because his entire career is kind of this already. So we're in a great starting place.
Yeah. Like, my whole bullshit has been making game and telling story about it. And as devlogs and stuff have gotten more popular as a genre of content, I have been attempting to raise the stakes on that, and repeatedly.
Whereas recently you've been raising the stakes on that as the process of creativity has become more of a popular thing on platforms and such.
Yeah, it's become more existentially urgent for people to see things being made, which you can see because now devlogs are like one of the most popular genres of like creativity content. To the point that a lot of people who are making devlog content are not even like releasing the stuff they're working on. Because again, the content is more about the process of creating than the result of said creativity. Yeah, like I've many times made a whole thing and put out a Twitter thread about it and then not released it, and no one's called me on it, because the main event, what they were there for, was the story.
Right. It's a really weird place for us to be, because I mean, if it's one guy, you, doing this, that's funny. If it's like you and several other people out there making similar content on a larger scale and making an entire career out of the process of broadcasting themselves making something that may or may not ever come out, that's weird. That's a very new thing, you know? It makes sense how we got to that point with streamers and, you know, short form content about a bite-sized piece of a larger story or just a very condensed anecdote. But if you step back and actually look at it, I just can't get over the strangeness of content focused on creating other content, with the implicit idea being that end goal is not actually what's important. Maybe you care, but whatever. It's more just about look, I made the guy jump today. Check it out.
Yeah, but I mean, often like the idea of the end goal being important is crucial. Like it's very difficult. The minute that you acknowledge that it doesn't actually really matter whether your thing gets done at all, you lose a core motivating factor of the story that you're selling. I don't actually like it's something you can watch happen with devlog YouTubers, where they will stop making actual progress on the game over time and just to continue doing stuff that makes for good devlogs, probably not even realizing themselves that like their goal has fundamentally shifted, and it actually like they're not moving towards an end point anymore. They're just like fucking vibing and making stuff in a different way. They're
on the treadmill now.
Yeah, and we like to keep them there.
Yeah. And part of what I find, I was going to say that it's fun that we're doing this, because if this turns into a real video next year, then people will be clued in on it way ahead of time as to what we're doing. They'll be able to hear all the conniving little aspects we may or may not lean into, like the fact that the end goal is not actually the deliverable, because we may or may not tell the story that way. But I thought about it, and I think what I want to do is I want to try to be as transparent about it as possible, because that's the one thing that I'm not seeing anyone do, right? Is talk about like the angle that they're telling the story from as part of the story. Like the idea would, I want how we landed on making this video to be part of the video, because making the video while making the video game is what the whole thing is about. It's an extremely fucking weird place to be in and be making stuff, and I kind of want to show all angles of it rather than just pitch it as like us making a video game, you know? So I think the reality is stranger and more interesting.
I think so, but I also would wonder how that would work narratively, because it sounds like you're talking about you're speaking from two perspectives at once, which is like the meta managing the story, how does the project work level, and then also like we are also in it making this thing and treating it very seriously. Well, because even though like the stakes are technically low, I don't think that we can treat it that way while we're in it.
Oh, absolutely not. But for no other reason, I wouldn't want to, because I want to make a good video game. I'm not taking a bunch of money just to fuck off with it and play around in Unreal for a few months, you know? I do want us to be able to make something. Yeah. So like, yeah, the stakes might be low in terms of what happens if we fail, but that doesn't mean that the stakes aren't low in terms of our ability to create something we're proud of.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather have made a video about how we pulled off this crazy thing and it's actually not too bad, rather than a video about how fantastically we failed and what you might be able to learn from that experience.
Yeah. There is also a bad incentive at play here, which is that good, healthy development practices do not make for as entertaining stories as being in the trenches.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is something that I do to myself on purpose when I'm like making these things, is like I put wild constraints and I push into weird territory where I know I'm going to get fucked over somehow, because finding my way out of that is fun and interesting. I don't know how I would go about asking other people to go on that part with me. Like whenever I'm working with other people, it's a very important thing for me to like insulate them from that part of the process.
Yes,
and here,
absolutely.
Especially if we're trying to get people together who are also good at like talking about what they're doing and
being on camera and telling a story.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how that gets navigated.
Well, I have a twofold answer to this. Firstly, I think it entirely depends on who we bring on as to whether or not it's okay to ask that of them.
Yeah.
You know? Like if we brought Eli on, for instance, like I think we could ask them to do it. I think they'd be chill. Obviously, we would have to have a long conversation about what that would look like before just like throwing them into it.
Yeah, it would have to be like mutually self-inflicted torment.
Exactly.
Everyone would have to create their own little prisons, and we would all have to agree. And like, yeah, it has to be opt-in.
But more importantly, I don't think that's a prerequisite for this kind of narrative. In fact, I think that it could be a breath of fresh air to see a lot of people making good decisions. And it could be insightful. I know if we do this, I know I'm going to learn a ton about the process by just being a part of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like showing the kinds of decisions that need to be made in order to make a very scoped down project get done on time is, to me, just as interesting as seeing it go wrong. So I don't necessarily agree with you that like things that like being thrown into the trenches is a spicier thing. It's like traditionally, sure, it is, but I have faith that you and I together can absolutely spin a more positive experience into something equally engaging. It's really just whatever happens is with all these projects, right? Like a project about a project is always a weird thing, you know? Wherever you're documenting the process of doing something, you never know exactly how it's going to go. And whenever you have a lot of money riding on it going in, there's a lot of stress there inherently. But I think that as long as we roll with whatever happens once we get into the process, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
The only real danger that I can foresee is us trying to force a narrative into an experience that isn't what's actually happening. Like trying really hard to synthesize something happening or going a certain way, you know?
Yeah. And I think that honestly, the dynamic is going to be weird enough that that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Because the story is being told from your perspective as like the fish out of water type shit. Like there is these things are going to come up very naturally. And like the conflict being trying to head off all of the landmines that you're stumbling into as quickly as possible it's gonna be interesting and weird, and I don't think it necessitates like setting up an insane situation.
Right. The premise is already insane. Nothing needs to be set up. I think we've talked enough about the idea of telling the story. This is probably infuriating for people to listen to, because at no point have we talked about what game we want to make, which is kind of like the whole fucking thing. So let's pivot to that. I had a rule with this idea, which is that I wasn't going to entertain the idea for a second unless it was something that I could actively contribute to in some way. Because if I'm just the guy with the money who's like overseeing stuff and I don't know what's happening and I don't have any expertise in what anyone is doing, then I'm not going to be a help. I'm just going to be a hindrance, and it's going to be really awkward. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a producer who's a know-nothing. That's not fun or fulfilling. And it will lead to a worse product, and it might hurt people along the way. It's just infinite reasons that's not a good idea.
I mean, that's the fun and fulfilling part, but
yes,
go off
yes. No, we spent a lot of time brainstorming. What we landed on was the idea of a game with aesthetics that mirrored something that I'm already familiar with. And you suggested the idea of like the animated videos I do, to which I basically replied, no, that's stupid. And not good. And then I thought about it and realized that the cardboard videos are actually a really fucking weird idea for a video game. What would a video game that looks like a cardboard video I've made possibly look like? How do you even begin to navigate that as a prompt?
Yeah, there's like a few examples that I know of at all,
but none that are one-to-one.
Yep.
I could think of maybe Tearaway, the game that Media Molecule made when they were done with Little Big Planet. You threw up
Legend
a
of
few examples.
Bumbo was the one that I remembered.
Right.
There's like things that take place at small scale, like Claybook was a big one. I know there's that recent multiplayer shooter where you're like playing all as toys, but you do some like weird and specific stuff with set dressing and also the whole, weirdly high production value of your cardboard dioramas.
Appreciate it.
That, it's, I don't know. It would have to be explored. And but you would have to be the one to explore it.
There's a lot that I've learned by doing that over the past couple of years. And what I've found is that mixing and matching the kinds of the kinds of detail and care that you give to certain things is interesting. So like I think that if instead of doing everything with cardboard and being really scrappy about the production, I had like ditched it as soon as possible and just started making proper miniature sets and like make everything as nice as possible, it wouldn't have been as interesting. Because like the fact that it looks very thrown together, because it is part of what makes it fun. And it creates a weird contrast to the parts that are very clearly a little more thought out, like the lighting or the way that it's filmed and edited together. So there's a fun contrast, but at the same time, I think that there's just a lot that you can get out of exploring simple textures of things. Cardboard is a surprisingly malleable and flexible material. And it does this cool thing wherever it's made of multiple different textures in one. So if you peel one layer off, you get a new weird layer underneath it. And you buy different kinds of cardboard, you get different textures. And if you mix them together, you can create new weird things with it that play with light in different ways. And there's just infinite possibilities. I never thought I would have gotten so much out of something so little and inexpensive. But that maps perfectly onto a video game because all of those rules absolutely still apply no matter how you go about them. Whether that's you suggested photo scanning physical environments. I thought about maybe something that was a little more low stakes and easier to implement, which would be the idea of like a PS2 game with this aesthetic. What would that be like? And there's interesting challenges to both of those approaches, right? Mm-hmm. I think we decided against photo scanning because once you make a level, you're basically locked in. And if ever you want to change something, you basically have to rebuild the entire thing from scratch.
I mean, I was against photos. I was against you building entire levels out of cardboard and photo scanning it. I was pro using phone to photo scan objects and cardboard textures and shit from different angles.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, that's easy.
Yeah, but you didn't like that idea because you thought that it would not cohere well manipulating all that stuff in engine, and having flexibility and level design was more important.
Yeah, again, I mean, we don't want to get too into the weeds of it, but basically I was skeptical as to how flexible you could make what is essentially a picture of a piece of cardboard with very realistic lighting. Which is why I suggested PS2, Xbox, GameCube era stuff, is because that was during the time wherever we just didn't give a fuck. We would just have textures with a lot of baked-in lighting, and then we would just apply new lighting to it anyway. We hadn't learned not to do that yet. So we could get away with it if we tried to aim for a game that looked a little bit janky in that way.
Yeah.
We would have to apply those constraints to ourselves. Yeah, without visual aid, it's kind of weird to explore this too deeply in podcast format. So I think we'll leave it there. But needless to say, there's a lot of really exciting places you could take that in terms of lighting and like what kind of interior designs you would want to depict using cardboard materials and other stuff. And like there's a lot of experimentation we would have to do in terms of committing to an aesthetic, because I've been very flippant on how much I commit to the materials I use in the past. In a video game, you obviously can't do that. Everyone needs to be on the same page. So figuring that out would be interesting.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is that I have this pet peeve with video games where the aesthetics don't match the gameplay or they don't feed into one another. And I didn't want to do that. It's not even a video game gripe. It's just a media gripe. I don't like whenever the thing looking a certain way does not contribute to the thing. It's just, it's just is that way. So I basically said that if we're going to make a video game that is reminiscent of the way I make cardboard videos in any capacity, that needs to serve the gameplay in an active capacity. And so what we basically spent the next couple of hours exploring was the idea of what a shooter would look like if we were to stick ourselves into that.
Yeah, we could kind of pick a random genre and then started being like, okay, how can we make this apply?
Yeah, and I've forgotten most of that discussion. Do you remember where we went with a lot of that?
Yeah, we went all over. Part of what we talked about was like the idea of what different craft supplies could do in terms of like very tiny scale violence.
If it's a shooter, having grenades be firecrackers, having scissors be your melee weapon, using the environment in order to interact with enemies by like having a glue gun that slows them down or sticks them together, maybe a stapler that can pin people to the wall or pin them together. Really, there's a lot of fun stuff you could think of.
Also, again, we know that there have been games that have played with these ideas before.
Right.
This is the least interesting part of the process. It just happens to come first. When you have ideas, they get shaped by what you do with them and how they fail in practice. And then what comes out on the other side is hopefully your own. I'm just saying that because I don't want any DMs telling us that we're copying sticker physics 8. But
I get so many comments about aping sticker physics 8.
So many all the time, every day. It's crazy.
Right up there with Megafuck 14 is like top things that I need to stop talking about.
Fuck yeah. So like mechanically, that would be things that you could do. The idea of how that would affect traversal, what could you do in terms of like mobility with craft supplies and small scale, fucking little creatures.
Right.
Level design, how you would compartmentalize different areas, because you can't just do like wide open, like you couldn't do like a Halo Infinite world out of cardboard and have it like feel like it made perfect sense. At least not one-to-one, without having some other gimmick to explain it.
Right. Or just having everything be really sterile looking. This is what it's interesting, because what you're describing is a problem that I'm sure the Tearaway team had to solve. And what they ended up with is everything not just being like cardboard, but it was just like scraps of paper. Like it was more broadly the idea of just craft to depict a world. And so they leaned much more on like colors of paper that are folded and cut up to resemble different things.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? Because if everything is relatively monotone, then you're much more restricted in terms of what you can pull off.
It also helps, I think, that the games, if I remember, that game was a top-down perspective game, so you were always only looking at one small section of the diorama.
No, they it played that way for the most part, but you had a relatively free camera sometimes, and if you went into certain menus, the perspective would shift dramatically to like a ground-facing forward thing.
Oh, got it. Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of scripted area. I think there might have been a photo mode, but there was also like a few areas I remember where if you walk out into like this central hub area, the camera pulls out, FOV goes down, you get to see like the wide open vista. They got pretty ambitious with it.
Yeah, world made of scraps more than cardboard diorama paper.
Right.
school project type shit.
So there's people have done stuff like this before, but I don't know of anyone who's tried something this specific because it's a very limiting thing to do, which is part of what makes it interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't hinge too much on like, has anyone done this specific thing before? Because
it's
always a
right.
losing battle.
You're true.
But
You're true.
I think you have interesting ideas and approach.
Thank you. I mean, what's also fun about this idea is that the aesthetic can pretty cleanly map onto all manner of genres of game. Like, think about an RTS.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the easier ones you could do. I mean, there's so much fun you could do with the UI of a video game that's crafted in the same way. Name a genre. We could explore this for any number of things.
Yeah.
Think of a car game. Wouldn't it be interesting to just have the cars be like little RC things, but the world is crafted out of like a miniature thing? That sounds like something someone has absolutely done before.
Yeah, I think that's probably most RC cars. Well, no, because they're multiplayer.
But we would do it in a more awesomer way. So we could. So it's something. Yeah. What else? Fucking just for fun. What would an MMO look like if you stuck to this aesthetic?
Oh God, that would be fun. I think.
Would it?
The idea of just like I think it would look like perhaps Club Penguin. Because you need. Cause I'm very specifically referring to like the way that each of those, you had a bunch of distinct rooms that could each function as independent cardboard dioramas. The popsicle stick thing makes it very, very easy for you to have like, you know, player customizability expression. You literally just tape the fucking different assets together. If you wanted to be really bold, you could let people draw their own, but you would need an approval process for that.
No.
And 99% of them would be dicks.
Or the Twin Towers.
Yeah, or both.
Yes. Isn't there a funny anecdote that you have about how you like
the destruction of Lego Universe, Death by Dick?
You've been in meetings. I didn't know that. I thought you were just. I was under the impression that you've been in meetings at least once or twice where people had to discuss exactly this happening and how they would combat it.
Oh yeah, the Lego Universe thing is one of the greatest Twitter threads I believe that has ever been written. There are reasons that you don't really have good mod support on consoles, and a lot of them are because platform holders don't want 9/11 on their little accessible in their games, and unless you're fucking Fortnite. You don't have the power to go to, you know, insert company here and saying, well, we'll just like moderate away the 9/11. You need to like come to them with an action plan, or you need to come to them with a way to avoid 9/11s.
You need an algorithm that can detect the 9/11s.
Yeah, or like a support or mod team, or like inherent restrictions in the tools that make it so you cannot 9/11 on their platform.
And we've seen so many times gamers will always find a way to make 9/11. It will always happen. It doesn't matter how good the tools are.
Yeah. It's a fact of life.
So I don't think we would want to lean into the idea of creating content for that reason.
Yeah. Fuck. It's reminding me of Drawn to Life for some reason. That fuck the DS and Wii game.
I mean, that makes sense. That's like got a sort of loosely papercrafty aesthetic to it.
Also, I will say if you are doing a single player game, you do get a lot more leeway with being able to do 9/11s. Because it doesn't who's gonna see it, you know? It's not like you're not gonna get a call from some parent being like, oh my god, they just hit the anyway. No, because you did it yourself.
Yeah. Oh my god, my child just hit the second.
Yeah.
I don't know. If it sounds like we have basically given this an afternoon's amount of thought at most, it's because we have, and we're kind of trying to keep it that way to an extent, based on how much the people who will be giving us money want us to have going in, which ideally is very little.
Yeah.
Because the part of this process is going to be figuring out what we want to make and documenting that.
Yeah. And also, having a very elaborately thought out game idea before you start working on it is a really fantastic way to sink a lot of time into being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you're looking for is like a direction and a concept and a target to start moving towards very quickly. And so you can see what works and what doesn't, and adapt to it, because reality will always hit you in the face like a object that will hit you in the face.
I wanted to try it because whenever we were talking about this, whenever we first had the ideation talk, you started prompting me with basic questions so as to have a starting point to explore this from. You know, what kind of games do you care the most about, or know the most, or feel the most comfortable talking about? You know, what kind of thing do you think you could contribute to a project like that?
Yeah, soul searching.
If I were to ask you all of those questions, I wonder where we would go.
Fuck. We'll be right back.
Don't say the nuts like.
I won't talk about the nuts like right now. It's interesting because the kind of games that you play and the kinds of things that you like to make are very often two different things.
Oh yeah.
I really love, I'm a fucking fiend for puzzle games, but I don't think I would necessarily enjoy sitting down to design a puzzle game. It informs the way that I design other types of games and the way that like I process ideas, but it doesn't mean that like I would love to do that.
100%.
The types of things that I really enjoy in playing and engaging with are normally very like dense with ideas. I don't normally like to play games spacing out or like listening to something else, or I'm not looking for things that fill time in a satisfying way. I'm looking for things that are delivering something, because I'm an asshole.
Engage people actively.
Yeah. I'm a fucking asshole.
If you're gonna give me your time, you're gonna give me all your time.
Yeah. And look, hey, I completely understand the appeal of those games. I've gotten into them in phases of life, but it's not normally the stuff that sticks out in memory. When I think about,
so you're speaking very broadly here. Can you give it an A/B example of what you're talking about? Like, are you comparing like Fortnite? Is this the kind of game you talk about when you mean like not actively engaging you?
I think like big RPGs, like I struggle to get into.
Oh, okay.
And it's because like those are, like when people look back on them, they remember those as like places that they've been and visited and spent a lot of time in. And I just really struggle to get over that hurdle. When I think about things that I like to make though, it's generally, I don't know how to, the way that I've been trying to phrase it, and I hate putting it like this because it is the most asshole way to do it, but it's like, I really like being in hostile design spaces. Like I like trying to make things work that aren't supposed to work, where it feels like I am meeting resistance, which is why I make the kinds of things that I do. It's why I would...
You like to just put yourself in a big fire pit and see how long it takes to get out.
Yeah, because the moment of like making things connect and coming out the other side of that with something that makes sense is unbelievably fun to me. It's really good. Like some of my fondest memories of making games are being in like a crisis situation where it seems like this project is absolutely not going to work out, and then figuring out the one or two things that need to change.
I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's good.
It's better than healthy. It's funny. This
is sounding dangerously like a lot of conversations I've had with developers.
It's important to me to be a healthy person and to not let it take over my life. It's important to me to have agency in those situations. I would not enjoy being thrown into that situation under someone else's management, or if I was dragging a lot of people through hell with me
without your consent. Yeah. If I did it to you, it would be awesome.
It would be really fun, and I would smile so much through the tears.
Yes.
And but yeah, it's like in these situations, these are typically ones where I have a lot of control over what I'm doing. And that kind of shit is fun. As for how that maps onto making a video game, it really doesn't for the most part, because as a programmer, I'm normally like one of the first people in a project and the last people out, which means that it is a huge time commitment. more so than almost any other job in the fucking team, like on par with directing, if not sometimes at certain points in the project, slightly more, as the director watches powerlessly as the programmer drowns in bugs meeting a deadline.
Yeah.
It's intense, which is prohibitive to making lots of large projects.
But what's interesting is that if we commit to this with you in more of in both a producer role and an active programming role, is that all of this will feed directly into what you end up making and being willing to make.
Yeah.
And so we would have to navigate this actively as part of the process.
Yeah.
If we were to make a project that satisfies those needs from you, that's going to very actively shape the product being made and how it functions.
Yeah. And I think I would like that part of that to be bringing on a separate programmer so that I could focus on other areas of the project. I don't know how well that would work, though.
What you're saying, the idea you're proposing is bringing on a normal person so that you can just be a little fuckazoid and occasionally check in on them and see if they're being normal adequately.
Yeah. It's also the other thing that I really love doing when working on teams is creatively enabling other people. I love building tools for other people to use. I love fixing problems and then unblocking other people. But like the tools is the main funnest thing, which I'm gonna put a pin in for now and then come back to in a second. But like when it comes to like working with other people, I think that like being able to jump in very quickly, explore something or set up the infrastructure for something and then allow them to continue filling it out, that's cool. As far as building tools, though, this is something that I think has been missing from. So if you watch any of these devlogs, they are so heavily edited, even compared to like, if you compare a video game devlog versus like a music YouTuber making their thing. The music YouTuber very often includes raw footage of them just working and making the thing. The devlog YouTuber very rarely does this because it's fucking boring and impossible to see what's actually going on, and all of our tools are clinical as hell, even when they are showing you, well, what is happening.
If you've ever watched devlog, it's really funny to go back to devlogs with this in mind and see how often, instead of viewing a developer actually working, you see the developer's face with the screen and the reflection of their glasses or something, and then like a panning shot of the keyboard.
Yep.
And just like the cinematographer desperately trying to make the process of frowning at a computer screen and occasionally typing on it interesting to look at.
That's the mechanism that is available to bring out the like internal drama of like running into these conflicts, because it's not surfaced visually in any other way. It's like that and animations and, you know, trying to check on screen recordings, or more often saying, so I just did that.
Right.
And then, so I did that. And not really taking you through that process, just going to great pains to avoid that, which I think is a huge shame. And it's something that I'm addressing right now. Like one of my main projects is like, I'm making a custom game engine that is designed to make programming, hopefully, eventually, as visually interesting as any other creative output. That's like the big moonshot goal that's guiding my various little failures.
Oh, I just wanted to explore that for a second, if you don't mind us going off the rails.
Go, do it.
Because how you're doing that, I find interesting.
Yeah.
The idea of making a program that you can edit in real time and which is constantly updating live as you edit it to reflect changes, rather than the traditional way of doing it, which, as I understand it, is to have a version of a game that you can run and pause at any given time, and then whenever you're ready to make changes, you stop it, you make those changes, and then you press play and you see if it worked. It's a very separated process where there is a cause and an effect, and those are not immediately apparent.
Yeah, and like so the thing that you're describing is the technical term is hot reloading. It's the idea of like reloading the code without, you know, changing anything else about the state of the game. So you can like modify the behavior without ever stopping the game from running. It's like it's an old idea. It's just also not done very well almost ever. Like Unity has hot reloading built in, and it stops working almost the instant that you do anything more complicated than you would get to in like an hour-long project.
Cool.
It just breaks, and you end up having to do the restart cycle anyway. There's like there's like people who are trying to make better hot reloading to jam into Unity because it's also just a nicer way to work, to not have to like go through this mental back and forth between two different, modes of thinking.
But you're
like,
taking this to the extreme.
Where like this is not just a good workflow thing. It's just like, if you could take this as far as it could go and just say like, the game is always running, it never stops running, and it's updating while you type. How do I structure everything around that idea to make sure that like you can watch a game coming together in real time, so that even if you have no idea
letter
what I'm
by
typing,
letter,
even if you have no fucking clue what I'm typing, you can still understand what is happening as it's happening, with no need for me to go back and like re-explain everything in a different way. And it's like everything else that I've done is just different expansions on that whole silly little concept.
Are you at liberty to talk about the tools that you've made for games that are out and ones that aren't?
I'll talk about anything that is now public knowledge, but like,
is unbeatable public knowledge.
They let me publish my funny little tool for that.
Oh, okay, cool. Because I saw the tool that you had made in action a little while ago.
Yeah,
and it was really, really fun to see how that came together and how very obviously it was that you had made it.
I try to smuggle MS Paint art into the back end of every game that I work on, and I've been pretty successful so far.
Not even just that. Now you just smuggle it into everything you work on, full stop.
Yeah, it's power. But it's like, so the thing to know about game developers is that they have been spending so long using very clinical, boring tools that they have forgotten what the light of the sun feels like on their face. So resigned are they to the prison that they have paid a subscription every month for until the end of time. So when I step in to make a tool, for example, on Unbeatable, I was brought on to make a tool to help them build like in-game cutscenes and stuff. I have like a collection of bullshit I carry from project to project to make it always have ridiculous UI. And I always try to design the tool like a video game, trying to be very conscious of like, I try to make sure that when I'm designing tools, I'm designing them like a video game, like not just like, is there a button that will do the thing that they want me to make it do, but like, how does the way that this is set up, how does this workflow, like engaging with this system, affect what people will want to do with it? I want to make sure that like making more game is as easy and fun as possible, which means partially also like making Unity have Comic Sans in the editor and retooling a lot of the UI widgets to bounce and shit when you click on them, and all this ridiculous shit.
Right. How does that manifest for a cinematic editing tool beyond the aesthetics? Right, because I mean, it's all well and good to focus on like the UX of like, ooh, I click the button and it goes wah, 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 but like, okay, more fundamentally, are you able to speak at all as to like what that looks like in use? Like, if you were to have designed my workflow for Blender, how would you have made it more fun, quote unquote?
Yeah,
what does that even look like?
Shit, those are two very different questions. Okay,
well then focus on the first one.
I'll start the first one. Yeah, I wish I remembered more. There's definitely things that I remember wishing that I could have gotten to that I didn't.
My brother in Christ, you made the tool like this year.
I was in like, no, it wasn't this year.
Oh,
I was allowed to talk about it this year and show it this year.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, making an in-game cutscene involves several different things, from like typing out the script for things to happen to like placing objects in the scene. Like, I'm going to walk to this point and I want to put that in there in Unity. And those were all very separate pieces. Like the code editor was one separate window, and the putting things in, it was a whole mess. So what I did was like, I tried to take everything that you wanted to do while making an in-game cutscene and just condense it all to one place. Where like, if you want to make a player walks, or a character walks somewhere, there's a button that very nicely just like makes that point in the scene, and you drag it out, and then you press another button and it automatically copies to your clipboard the code for making that happen, and you can paste it in that same window. It's just like, I want you to have to think about as little as possible. I don't want you like switching mentally between like different modes while you're trying to do one task, because it's burdensome.
It's really interesting how much what you're describing mirrors the way people have explained to me the process of creating Halo Infinite's new tool set. It was described by people as a simultaneous overhaul, partial rewrite, and attempt to consolidate a loose collection of tools into a singular interface.
Yeah.
Have I shown you what the old Halo modding tools look like? Because they're basically just the dev tools, just a little bit nerfed. You know how it goes. They have a separate like hex editor, and then a command line thing, and then like a tool that allows you to view the level and change a little bit in it. But it's all very, very isolated. You could tell that these tools have grown and adapted simultaneously, but in very different ways.
Yeah.
Possibly by different people. It's very difficult to wrap your head around coming from a place where previously my understanding of a process is that one program should basically be able to do most of what you'd want the fucking program to do, unless what you're looking to achieve is something fundamentally different. I don't expect my video editor to be good at editing photos, right? Well, but I do expect it to have basic audio managing stuff rather than a whole other program being dedicated to that running simultaneously.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the question is also like, when I come into a project, I'm not asking like, what can make a better game engine? It's like, or what could make a better video editor? If I were to like come in and make a plugin for Premiere for you, it'd be like, what could make Premiere better at making your exact type of video? That's like one of the wonderful fucking things about making tools for small teams, is that you can just talk to the people who are going to be using the thing and make their lives better specifically, and fill the thing with like little in-jokes and touches that are for them. Like a while ago, I did a tool where we had adaptive music in a game, and so the audio person needed to go in and just like spend a lot of time adjusting sliders to make the mixes go. So like I had that set up, and you had to have the game running to test it and preview it. And one of the things I did was like I made it hide until the game was running, but once you started running the game to test the audio, it would start posting like stupid encouraging messages, just kind of like wiggling left and right, like, you're doing great, man, this sounds awesome. Just like cool. The most stupid, and it's just like an unbelievably stupid touch that took like 10 seconds, because I thought it would make him laugh when he fired it up for the first time. And the message that I got was just like in the dev group chat, just like, I love you, Sam. It's just like it's fun. It's fun to do simple shit like that. In the best case, you can make making things feel human again, instead of like embodying this clinical whatever Unity interface or whatever else.
Yeah.
And tailored to you, instead of like having to carve out what you want from a general purpose interface that's made to make every game. And anyway, but like to wrap it all back, the biggest thing that I think has not been fully exploited yet, for lack of a better term, is that when you make tools that have personality, looking at them is fun. And that's important now. Right now, game studios are living and dying by how well they can tell their own stories, and making your process more accessible to people as like a spectator sport almost is awesome and cool, and not possible with our current slate of boring ass tools, which is part of why I'm making my custom engine in such an unprofessional looking way, where it makes stupid sounds and everything's made in MS Paint, is because I want my own fingerprints to be all over the hammer I'm using to beat these nails in. I don't know how much sense that makes.
I had a lot of fun in hearing the cogs turn when I first proposed the idea of you working on a game like the cardboard one, because immediately where your mind went, even if you didn't say it out loud, it was so obvious that the first thing you started doing was thinking about like, well, okay, what tools would you need for that? How would they be? How is this process streamlined for the people who would be brought onto the project? Which, of course, manifested into how do you get art tools into the thing without having to write a bunch of code to do it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a relief to me to realize that we're defaulting to those conversations so early in, because I know for a fact that those are conversations we would have to have the second that we have this project greenlit. It would be like the first thing we'd have to talk about is how we create a workflow that allows us to iterate quickly. And so to constantly be reminded that this is something that you actively care about and are passionate about removes a lot of roadblocks that a team might otherwise run into when trying to design something like this.
Yeah, and the other thing is like, not just how do you make tools that leave a good workflow so that you're not stuck grinning and bearing it and taking more time than you need, but also like how can you make sure that the stuff that you're doing reads visually because you're going into this knowing you're making a video out of it? How do you make sure that like you're walking away with usable footage of the game engine and people actually doing stuff?
Yeah. Obviously, making the tool workable for the people making it comes first.
No, it's hand in hand. I think it's the same. I think this is
Really?
the necessary thing that happens when you start. I think that part of the reason that our tools are so unwatchable is because they suck. them not surfacing what's happening to the outside world also means that they're not surfacing that to us. Like when I'm programming, all of the connections that are being made I'm holding them in my head instead of being able to see them happen while I type. That is a problem of trying to let's play Visual Studio, and it's also a problem of like my actual workflow. And so when you make tools that provide better feedback and are faster and more fun to use and more suited to the people that are using them, the thing that comes out the other side is also visually readable.
This is a very broad idea, but have you thought about trying to solve that exact part of the problem of like having to hold ideas in your mind instead of having them visually represented in some way? Even if it's just a goofy like gag of like, I really need to get this function working, but I have to get 3 other things working before I can test this. We're going to put a pin on this. We're going to put a pin in that and then visually put a pin in this part of the code, drag that off to the screen somewhere. That's going to hang there for a bit. We're going to come back to that.
It's very...
But hey, you double click it, it brings you right back to the code. It's not like it can help you actionably, but it's a stupid thing.
Yeah.
With a little MS Paint rendition of a pin in a notepad or something.
Yeah. I mean, and the answer to that is that I think that the best interface for that is the speedrun timer. Just constantly counting up with no clear end and just constantly adding new tasks to the speedrun timer, because it's just a to-do list with an interface that we know to associate with stress. It's great.
Right.
Weirdly enough, like programming itself, I was trying to figure out like, how do you represent all the things that I'm working with visually? And I looked into a bunch of like visual programming tools. Like what if, the nodes and like whatever, how Scratch works, where you're like putting blocks together to make the logic work. And I found that most of those were actually not helpful in communicating what was in my head at all. And the thing that you want to do is just tie what I'm doing to what's changing on the screen. It almost doesn't matter how what I'm doing is represented, as long as the connection is clear. It's wacky. Anyway,
it's translating that into whatever we end up needing, whether that be a level editor or a cinematic tool or something that allows one to iterate quickly on the parameters of a weapon or whatever the fuck. Is going to be a very interesting challenge if we go down that road.
Yeah. And there's these things also might end up being very small. And part of this is knowing what not to build. Like if you're only going to do something once and you're not going to mess with it a lot, you could build an awesome tool for it. You probably don't want to.
Right.
Because that time could be better spent elsewhere. So there will be an exercise in resisting temptation to do a funny.
I think that that's only a problem if you don't prioritize early on what needs to be done, right? That's much more likely to be something you're going to let the demons win on if you have not previously given thought to what people need to be streamlined in the short term or mid-term.
And everyone knows that that's something that comes really naturally to game productions.
Right.
No, it's like like one of the skills that I get recommended for on occasion is like being able to call those things in advance. And the reason that that's something that people recommend me for is because it's not common, and I also fail myself on that almost any time I do a personal project.
Oh yeah,
because it's so easy to get sucked into the like, I'm going to solve this next series of problems vortex. You're like, wouldn't it be nice if I could do this thing? And then not like putting a box around how much time you're willing to dedicate to it. And so you just keep going like, oh, fuck, I'm so close to wrapping up this thing. Anyway, it's a nightmare.
Presumably, whenever you're working on a project with other people who need you to do specific things, the externalized pressure makes it a lot easier to focus in on what needs to be done rather than what you want to do, right?
when you are working with a responsible group of people who are all making sure to keep their radars on.
Sure.
There's two parallel responses I can give. One, what I'm expecting to happen with us, which is responsible, and two, what can happen and does happen a lot.
Right. Sorry. I'm coming at this with the idea that everyone is good at communicating as a given. That's on me. Sorry.
Yeah, communication hard, but good. So write that one down.
I don't know. Has yet to be seen. We'll prove that, but that trial by fire is yet to come. Trust me, I'll be testing you on that daily by just ignoring you.
Yeah.
And then getting mad next week when you don't have a deliverable.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you got to do to keep the employees. You always got to remind them who's boss.
Keep them on their toes. If you know what to expect, you get lazy.
Yes.
So you're going to have to give me a rundown on how to implement Agile as a system once we get going.
Yeah. I'm not ever going to talk with you again, I think.
I wonder if and when this project really does get going, because obviously we've got a ton of ideas that we haven't fully explored and are resisting exploring until we know that we can really direct that energy somewhere productive and financially feasible. If that does in fact happen, I wonder what this podcast will turn into for the duration of that, because it very easily could turn into an inadvertent active devlog / touchstone. And I don't know if I would mind that. I wonder if that would just that could accidentally or intentionally turn into a crucial part of how we end up telling the story.
Yeah.
And if we want to get a little funny with the narrative, whether we would worry about the podcast actively conflicting with the narrative that we tell or spoiling it. Yeah. I don't think I'm not worried about spoiling it.
Yeah.
The amount of people who watch the video is disproportionately going to be larger than the people who listen to this podcast. That much is a guarantee.
But so you're talking about like timeline fuckery.
Yeah, but also I'm just talking about like the listener experience. Like if they come in here for one thing, they're expecting us to just shoot the shit every so often, and slowly it morphs into just a you and I being talking about what went wrong this week.
Yeah, or the one. This will be the one haven that we have to not talk about that, because there is something. There is something interesting that happened. I don't expect that to happen on this project, but like when you're working on something with your friends, and especially when things get down to the wire, the business work relationship takes precedence over the friendship for those times where it's like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're like, yeah, if you've hired me to work on something and we're approaching a deadline and stakes are real and I'm having a bad day, I'm not going to bring that up with you, because like I can't. You have to separate that from the work, and the work is the thing. You can unpack that later.
Right. Like if I'm hiring you in this position, it really does not matter to me if your day sucks, unless it's so bad that it is going to affect your work or your mental health. Like if you're just feeling bummed out, I'm sorry, bro, we got a week till the deadline.
Yeah.
I'm as busy as you are. Doesn't really matter right now.
Yeah,
and I can absolutely see how that would manifest. I've been there a few times.
Yeah, and like I understand how like this can sound very dickish from the outside, but it's also just a thing of like you've created people are depending on you,
right?
And so you have to, and when you're doing that in a work environment at all, that's the dynamic. It's just like if you haven't done it before, the first time it's kind of jarring to have that happen with a friend, and then as long as you don't fuck each other over, walk it back afterwards.
Yeah, totally.
Once the stakes have been removed, you can just talk very openly again. But like, yeah, again, not something I would expect to happen on this project, because I think we're going into it with a very clear eye for managing the scope of it and making sure that everything is doable.
Never say never.
But
it's a project of this scale and with this amount of money going into it, anything can happen.
Yeah.
Especially depending on who we bring on.
Watch as our friendship falls apart live on podcast next year.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
The final conversation we ever have, besides coordinating the title of the episode. That's the last conversation we never have.
You need to make me a promise right now. If that ends up happening, we need to at least make it entertaining.
Oh man.
We can't just have it fizzle out. It's gotta be a really engaging spectator thing. And I don't mean we fabricate drama. I mean that we turn it into art somehow. I don't want the podcast to just fizzle out as it becomes more clear that we enjoy these conversations less and less with time.
Yeah.
I want this to be if anything, we got to fucking amp it up. We got to start we need to just save our qualms for when the mics are on and just fucking go at it for an hour.
Yeah. Real fucking like parents on the verge of the divorce while you're like just trying to play Wii at your friend's house or some shit energy. That's what we're going to try and recreate for you. So look forward to that.